It shouldn't have taken the events on January 6th for us to be reminded of the fact that we've got a major domestic extremism problem in the US, but it was at least an opportunity for some in the US government to start to take it seriously once again. But in their efforts to combat it, they might be moving in the wrong direction. And we're very lucky to be joined on the program right now by a reporter who's gonna break down one of those directions. This is reporter for the Intercept, as always, Ken Klippenstein. How's it going, Ken?
It's going good. Good to be with you again, John.
We're glad to have you here. I very much enjoyed your recent article about this effort that the Pentagon is putting together to combat domestic extremism, but it looks like there's a few issues with it, right?
Yeah, so the problem is they're working very quietly to bring on consultants to work with, and I was leaked from a source in the Defense Department. Some of these names that they're considering bringing on haven't yet formally brought on, although some of them it looks like are already in some kind of consulting relationship. But this included, neocon groups, anti-Muslim groups, very pro-Israel groups. And when you think about the response to domestic extremism that I would imagine the public, has some sympathy for, you probably are thinking of, responding to white supremacists, responding to, far right extremists of a very different sort than what this list of experts, so-called, that they're considering bringing on would suggest they're looking at.
And you've got a great breakdown of one of these groups. Before we move to those though, some of the names are the sorts of groups that you would expect, right? Groups that profile and track hate groups and that sort of thing.
Right, and they have experts from the ACLU as well, which isn't necessarily bad. And what I want to get across in this story is not that I'm against taking seriously domestic extremism. I think that's wise to do so. And I quote a former FBI agent who himself, as part of his job, infiltrated white supremacist groups and knows a lot about this and cares about this program. The concern is that when you bring in the crazies, as it seems like they're considering doing, that could undermine the mission, that I described a moment ago, and could hurt the whole program. So anyone who cares about responding rationally to domestic extremism should care when they're, considering bringing on folks that are going to undermine that goal.
So let's talk about one of these groups, the acronym MEMRI. What are they all about?
Yeah, so they were established by a former Israeli intelligence officer that today is a advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and kind of what they do is they translate Arabic stories into English. But there's and that sounds all right in itself. But as a report by the Center for American Progress a number of years ago found, there tends to be cherry picking in terms of the kind of stories that they end up translating. And that ended up playing a very central role in the run up to the invasion of Iraq after 9/11 and stoking a lot of this fear, translating these stories, in some cases having mistranslations to suggest, the Muslim extremists are coming, they're gonna get you. And we've gotta rally behind the military to protect us, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, when you look at expertise like that, you can imagine how this is gonna be applied when they have to come up with a list of keywords and indicators and things on social media to tell us, oh, what's going on with extremism here? I mean, you give them to these kind of groups, you can imagine what kind of keywords you can come up with.
Yeah, particularly if the issue is sort of selectively choosing things that will make a group look bad, giving you a fundamentally false idea of the breadth of the discourse, and then also selectively mistranslating to make it seem as bad and extreme as possible. Yeah, I can totally understand why you'd be a little bit concerned about them being involved in it, especially because, while this group is going to be looking into extremism, and our concerns are where exactly they're going to be pointing fingers, who they're going to be looking at. Nationally, you have this attempt to conflate the clear threat of white supremacists, the KKK, neo-Nazis, things like that, with BLM or Antifa or just whatever, just implying that particular groups of white supremacists are Antifa. So there's all this misinformation outside of this working group. You would imagine we'd want the best experts inside of the group to counter that. And so far it looks like we don't know for sure if that's gonna happen. But I'm curious, do we have any idea of the timeline for them choosing these groups?
It's going ahead pretty quickly, at least in the Defense Department, and there are different programs going on in different agencies. DHS has its own attempt to try to respond to this. The Department of Justice has their own. But in the case of the Pentagon, they have a counter extremist working group, and according to my understanding, they're going to be putting this stuff out very imminently. I'm thinking by the end of summer. So very soon they're going to be making these sorts of decisions. And I think that's why, people have as much as I'd like to take credit and say, oh, I'm a great reporter, I develop all these sources. At least a large part of it is that, people use me as a dissent channel because folks inside are concerned about the direction that at least parts of this are going. That's not to say that the entire response to domestic extremism is bad, but this particular part of it, this is not being pursued rationally.
Exactly, and your article, which is available on the Intercept, everyone should check it out because the details of memory are crazy, and some of the individuals involved in it came out about a week ago. Has there been any acknowledgement or response from the Pentagon or anyone involved in this effort?
They've been under a lot of pressure. Just yesterday, they were being grilled, the Pentagon press secretary, by the press corps, and to their credit, they did a pretty good job of it, asking about a subsequent story related to this one that I just had come out, where they're going to try to use an algorithm to detect, based on keywords, extremist activity, and try to anticipate, what might happen. I don't know exactly how they're going to execute that. I have some information about it, but this just sounds like standard Pentagon graft, where they give a bunch of money to some guy that says, oh, I've got a crystal ball that's going to be able to, do pre-crime reports to find out what's going to. It's like a Philip Dick novel, and it's not a criticism of how they're executing the social media algorithm. It's a criticism of the notion that you can predict anything based on just people's tweets. It's ridiculous, And so they're going down this road, and there are a lot of folks that are concerned about, again, not just the threats to speech and that kind of thing, but what this might do to the broader project, which, as we're talking about before, they do have sensible people coming on, and there are sensible things they can do. And it's not the entire program that's ridiculous. This is going to be used to smear that broader push, which I think makes sense. There is an extremist problem in the country generally. Certainly, there are racists in the military. I don't dispute that. That's important, and this draws away from that.
Yeah, this is moving a bit outside of so far the reporting that you've done, but I'm curious. I know that a lot was made of the fact that I don't know if it was specifically inside of the FBI or the Pentagon. I think it might have been the FBI. The groups that were specifically looking into white supremacists and domestic extremists back under Obama that the right wing went crazy about, and so they shut down some of these offices. Do we have any idea of the overlap or differences in function and mission between the groups that had been shut down and what's been spooled up right now? Like, is this intended to replace those earlier groups?
Well, in the case of Department of Homeland Security, they actually had a domestic extremism division that President Trump shut down almost immediately. I believe it was in 2017, and these guys focused on white supremacists and groups like that. Biden has reopened that. It's sort of a nuanced picture. He's done stuff that is sensible. What I'm covering here is something I think he's going off in the wrong direction because I care that these things be executed properly. And a lot of the problem is just being done in secrecy. When I talked to Congress, the House Armed Services Committee, they didn't seem to realize that any of this stuff was happening. So they're doing this all in secret. There's probably going to be large contracts. I know there's going to be large contracts, or at least that's the plan, going out to these firms to produce this software to try to anticipate these crimes. And presumably to these consultants that they're considering working with. So if Congress isn't being read into that, and it's going to come out eventually, that's probably not good. That the public isn't have some sort of input in how this is being executed. Yeah. And so it's the fact that it's happening in the shadows that I think is probably the biggest problem here. Because when you put it out in the open, people say, left and right have been getting response to this article. Yeah, this is ridiculous. This is a dumb idea. Let's not do it this way. Let's do something about it, but let's not do it this way.
Exactly. Well, hopefully continued coverage of your work will continue to put pressure on them and they'll go in the right direction. But if anyone watching this would like more details about this work or the follow-up work that Ken was referencing, it's available at The Intercept. And as always, Ken, we appreciate your work and you coming to join us.
My pleasure.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.